The fluorescent lights of the Fort Millridge Military Commissary hummed overhead as Evelyn Harper strolled through the canned goods aisle. Her steps slow but measured. At 71, Evelyn didn't move with the ease she once had, but there was still a quiet strength in her posture, the kind forged over decades of service and sacrifice. Her shoulders, though not as straight as they were in '88, still carried the weight of memories no civilian could ever understand. Her frame was a weathered military jacket, olive green, its sleeves faded and frayed. The color had dulled to almost gray in places. There were faint outlines over her left chest pocket, where a long-removed unit patch had once proudly rested. But those who noticed it rarely knew what they were looking at. Evelyn never said much about it. The jacket was hers, stitched with history, silence, and a sense of duty that never left, even when the uniform did nearby. Two junior officers in spotless uniforms leaned over a cart stacked with energy drinks and protein bars. First Lieutenant Jake Weller glanced up and nudged his buddy. Second Lieutenant Ryan Cole. "Check out Grandma GI." Jake chuckled under his breath, jerking his chin toward Evelyn. "That jacket looks like it came out of a museum exhibit." Ryan smirked. "Bet she bought it off eBay. Probably tells her neighbors she parachuted into Normandy." Their laughter wasn't loud, but it was loud enough. Evelyn heard them. She didn't flinch. She didn't even look their way. Her fingers hovered over a can of black beans, her mind momentarily far away on a night in a jungle that no one was supposed to remember. On a voice over a radio whispering, "They're closing in." One click out, she moved on. They didn't stop. As she headed toward the produce section, the young officers trailed behind, amused by their private joke. Evelyn paused near a stand of oranges, carefully selecting the ripest ones. "You know," Ryan said louder this time, "that kind of jacket was standard in the '70s. Real relic. Probably wears it for the senior discount," Jake added, with a grin. "Wants everyone to think she's some war hero." Still, Evelyn didn't react, but the air around her grew heavier. She was used to this. Every so often, the world forgot its manners, forgot the cost of freedom at checkout. The young cashier specialist, Lacey Duran, smiled wearily. She looked no older than 22, with tired eyes that hinted at student debt and double shifts. "Hi there, ma'am. You eligible for the military discount?" "Yes," Evelyn said simply, offering a worn ID card from her wallet. Jake and Ryan had joined the same line behind her now. Jake cleared his throat. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said mock-palate. "I couldn't help noticing your jacket. Pretty bold fashion choice. You serve." Evelyn turned slowly, her pale blue eyes meeting his with the calm of someone who didn't need to prove anything. "I did," she answered. "Really?" Ryan asked, smirking. "Because that's a serious piece of history you're wearing. What unit?" "Some things aren't for discussion," she said, turning back to Ward. "The register." Jake scoffed. "Come on. Anyone who served would be proud to say where and when. Unless, of course, they didn't actually serve." Lacey looked up her fingers, hovering over the keys. "Sir, ma'am, maybe we could keep it respectful. I'm just saying," Jake pressed on. "If I walked around in a fake Ranger tab, I'd expect to be questioned." "What's she hiding?" Evelyn said nothing. She didn't have to. The system had already spoken for her. Lacey frowned at her screen. It says your records are restricted." "Correct," Evelyn said softly. Ryan leaned over the counter, now curious. "Restricted? What kind of retirement ID says that?" Lacey shook her head. "Sometimes old records are, I don't know, flagged. Might be a tech issue." Jake grinned. "Or stolen valor." Evelyn didn't blink. "You boys should be careful with that phrase." "Why?" Ryan laughed. "If it walks like a duck." But before anyone could reply, Lacey said, "I'm going to need to call a supervisor." "Just a moment." Jake was already pulling out his phone. "Go ahead. I'll send this to base command myself. Probably catch a fake vet in the act. Good day for justice, huh?" Evelyn stared at the scanner as if it were a long-forgotten enemy. Calm, focused, waiting, not flustered, just tired. When Lacey stepped away to make the call, the tension thickened. The other shoppers around them pretended not to watch, but everyone did. Phones were out, eyebrows were raised. Jake held up his camera again. "Say cheese, ma'am." She looked directly into the lens for the first time. Her voice, when it came, was soft but firm. "Delete that." "Not a chance," Jake replied. "This is evidence." She just picked up her bag ID still on the counter and turned toward the exit. "You forgot your—" Lacey started, but Evelyn raised a hand. "It's fine." She walked past the line, the weight of 24 silent stares pressing into her back like ghosts. She walked with that same limp she'd carried since Caracas, when the helicopter didn't make it to the evac point, and she had to drag a wounded teammate through 800 yards of swamp under enemy fire. But that wasn't in any book, and the medal she earned, it wasn't on display. It was locked in a Pentagon vault, with the words "Do not release" printed across the file. The door opened. The wind was cold, and still, Evelyn walked forward. The video of Evelyn Harper quietly enduring accusations at the Fort Millridge commissary spread faster than wildfire across base group chats. Young soldiers laughed at it. Others shared it with disbelief. But in a dim office near the operations wing, one man didn't laugh. Colonel James Hawk Halstead leaned back in his chair, watching the video a second time. His finger hovered over the pause button, eyes narrowed at the screen. It wasn't the woman's posture or her calm expression that made his stomach tighten. It was that faint, ghost-like outline on the jacket over her heart. He zoomed in. There, barely visible under the fluorescent light, was the shape of a wing or maybe a blade, curved, angular, familiar. Familiar? No, it couldn't be. Halstead stood up quickly, grabbed his phone, and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. It rang once. "You still breathing, Maddox?" he asked, voice tight. "Last I checked," came the gravelly voice of retired Sergeant Major Luke Maddox. "Why? What's burning?" "I just sent you something. A video, I think." "I think Evelyn Harper is on this base." There was silence. On the other end, then a sharp inhale. "Are you sure?" Maddox asked, his voice suddenly sharp. Her face is older, worn, but it's her and the jacket. "Luke, that's the Spectre patch. Faded, but unmistakable." Maddox didn't speak. Right away, when he did, his voice was low. "My God, they still walk among us." The Spectre program. Officially, it never existed. Off the books, off the record. One of the most covert tactical divisions to ever operate under the U.S. flag. Deployed in crises the public never heard about. Missions that ended before headlines could be written. There were no medals, no parades, just silence. And Evelyn had been one of its finest. "She's being harassed," Halstead said, pacing. 2 lieutenants, hot off ROTC, mocking her at the commissary. They accused her of faking her service. Maddox swore softly. She didn't respond, Halstead continued, didn't argue, just stood there and took it. "That's Evelyn for you," Maddox replied. "She never talked, not even when it cost her a career." Halstead didn't wait. He hung up, grabbed his coat, and made a beeline to the base commander's office. By noon, whispers began to travel through the NCO network, the underground, grapevine of every military installation in the country. More senior staff were catching wind of what had happened. A few remembered the name. Some recalled a meeting long ago, when Spectre had been briefed behind sealed doors. By 2 p.m., General Douglas Harlan received a short, secure message on his private military channel. One line, one name. Harper Spectre. Then he ordered his aide to clear his afternoon. Meanwhile, Evelyn sat quietly on the bench outside the commissary, her grocery bag at her feet, the wind tugging at the frayed sleeves of her jacket. She watched the people coming and going. No one looked twice at her now. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small photo, folded and creased from years of travel. It showed 5 figures standing in front of a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter, faces smudged with dirt, uniforms soaked with sweat. 2 women, 3 men, all alive, all smiling. Only Evelyn remained. She ran a thumb over the image and closed her eyes. "Thought you'd moved to Arizona." The voice startled her, even though it shouldn't have. She opened her eyes slowly, standing in front of her. Was Colonel Halstead. Evelyn didn't stand. She just tilted her head. "Thought you retired." "Almost did," he said, taking the seat next to her. "Then they pulled me back for one more rotation." They sat in silence for a while. A kind of silence only old soldiers know. Not awkward. "Just waited. I saw the video," Halstead said at last. "I figured," Evelyn replied. "They don't know who you are. They don't need to. They think you're a fraud. They're young. Young people say things." Halstead studied her. "You're not angry?" I've had bigger battles." He smiled softly. "That patch still haunts people." She looked down at the faint outline. "I thought about removing it." "Don't," he said. "It's the only proof we exist." "I don't need proof." "No, but maybe they do." The next morning, Evelyn returned to the commissary. Not for groceries, she still had plenty, but because fear should never decide her routine. She walked the same path as the day before, through the front doors, past the rows of snacks and bottled water, but this time she wasn't invisible. A small crowd had gathered. Lieutenant Jake Weller stood near the front, phone ready again. Behind him, Ryan Cole looked more uncertain than before. Word had gotten around. A few senior officers were seen whispering in corners. Something had shifted. Jake lifted his phone back for round two. Evelyn met his gaze. "Just buying oranges," he smirked. "Still won't say what unit you were with." "No, you know," he said, stepping closer. "Real soldiers don't hide their service." "Young man," came a voice from the side, low but clear. "You ought to stop while you're behind." It was Sergeant Major Maddox. He stepped between them slowly, hands behind his back. Other senior staff had entered too. Major Ochoa, Chief Samuels. Even an old chaplain who had long since stopped attending base briefings. Jake blinked, suddenly unsure. "This woman," Maddox continued, "wore that patch when you were still learning your ABCs." Jake looked around. "Are you seriously defending her over a patch?" "No," said another voice, this time firm and unmistakably authoritative. "Over a legacy?" The room fell still. General Douglas Harlan had entered. Tall, clean-cut, he wasn't supposed to be on site until next week. The commissary froze as the general walked past stunned staff and startled officers. Harlan's eyes landed on Evelyn, and then he stopped moving. The room held its breath. He stepped forward slowly. "I'll be damned," he murmured, his voice more reverent than surprised. Evelyn straightened slightly, her face blank. "Specialist Evelyn Harper," Harlan said. Aloud, his voice now commanding. "Spectre, Team 3, Operation Dagger Point, Istanbul, 1997. You saved my life." The silence was deafening. Jake's phone slipped from his hand. The weight of General Harlan's words stunned the entire commissary. Into silence, Jake Weller's mouth opened, but no words came. Ryan Cole slowly stepped back, his hand lowering instinctively, and Evelyn, she simply stood there, calm, resolute, though something behind her eyes flickered, like a memory rising from deep waters. General Harlan took another step closer. "I never forgot you," he said. "Not for a day. You got us out of that safe house when it went sideways. You were bleeding, 2 ribs cracked, and you still carried Specialist Nguyen half a mile to the extraction point. I made it out because of you." The room was now packed with onlookers, young soldiers, civilian staff, retirees, even a few family members. No one said a word. Evelyn gave the general a small nod. "You were younger back then." Harlan smiled. "And you haven't aged a day." Someone chuckled, nervously from the side, but the general wasn't here to joke. "I saw the video," he continued, his voice steady. "I saw the way you were treated yesterday, and I'll say this now, publicly, in front of every soul present." He turned slightly to face the crowd. "This woman served in the most classified operations unit this country has ever fielded. The Spectre program was so black, most generals weren't even briefed on it. Her record is restricted not because it's fake, but because it's buried under national security clearance. She's a warfighter, a ghost, a protector of this country when no one else was watching." He turned back to Evelyn. "And I owe you my life." The moment was electric. You could hear someone's bag of chips crinkle in their trembling hands. Then, slowly, Harlan stepped back and saluted. A 4-star general, saluting a woman in a frayed, faded jacket, one whose name never made it into the news, whose medals were never pinned to a podium, whose story was never told. Evelyn blinked. It had been decades since anyone saluted her. Her hand rose slowly, and returned the gesture, crisp and proper. The crowd stood still for another beat, and then, like a ripple through water, others began to follow. Senior officers, enlisted staff, commissary workers, even a few civilians. One by one, people stood taller, hands over hearts, or lifting fingers in respect. Jake Weller and Ryan Cole stood frozen. Jake finally managed to croak. "I didn't know." We thought. Evelyn looked at him, not with anger, but with something deeper. "You judged the surface," she said quietly. "That's easy. Understanding takes time," he swallowed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Truly, we were wrong." She gave a slight nod. "Learn from it." The general stepped forward again, his face now more somber. "Captain Evelyn Harper, I am hereby authorizing the unsealing of your records for formal recognition. You and your team, the Ghost 5, will be acknowledged in full. The medals you were owed will be awarded. The names of your fallen honored properly." Evelyn hesitated. Her fingers gripped the fabric over her chest, tracing the outline of that long faded patch. "What about the families?" she asked softly. "They'll—" "No," Harlan said. "We'll reach out. We'll tell them everything. It's time." For a moment, Evelyn closed her eyes. She could see them again, Jackson, Ramirez, Cho, and Lynn, laughing in a debrief tent, eating MREs by the glow of a radio, each one taken before their time, each one erased from memory because of politics, but not anymore. She opened her eyes. Then, "I accept," she said. The general nodded. 3 weeks later, Fort Millridge hosted a recognition ceremony unlike any in its history. The base auditorium was filled to capacity. Rows of soldiers, retirees, government officials, and Gold Star families sat quietly, waiting. A small stage had been built, draped in dark green with silver trim. At its center stood 5 chairs. Only one was occupied. Evelyn Harper, in her jacket, still faded, still unaltered, sat with quiet composure, hands folded in her lap. General Harlan approached the microphone. "Today," he began, "we correct a great wrong." He detailed the Spectre program in terms vague enough for public record, but clear enough for the weight to land. Covert missions, unmarked locations, lives saved, names lost. Evelyn and her team, codenamed Ghost 5, had prevented a biological attack on U.S. soil. They'd destroyed rogue weapons labs. They'd rescued hostages no one knew were missing, and no one ever thanked them. Until now, he turned to Evelyn. "Captain Harper, please rise." She stood slowly. Her knees still ached. From Caracas, her shoulders still bore the scar from Sudan, but her back was straight. "For valor beyond measure. The Department of the Army awards you the Distinguished Service Cross," the general declared, "along with 2 silver stars and 3 purple hearts, each approved but never delivered due to classification." Applause thundered through the room. But Evelyn's eyes weren't on the medals. They were on the 4 seats beside her, each marked by a folded flag and a framed photo. Sergeant David Cho, Lieutenant Maria Ramirez, Corporal Jackson Lynn, Specialist Tony Vega. "They were my family," Evelyn said, stepping to the podium. "We trained together, fought together, bled together. When our missions ended, we didn't go to bars or celebrate. We cleaned our gear, wrote our reports, and went back out again, because the job was never really done." She looked at the audience. They didn't die in training. They didn't die by accident. They died protecting people who will never know their names. Today, you do. Silence filled the space. Then the crowd stood, clapping, many wiping tears from their eyes. After the ceremony, Evelyn was approached by dozens, young officers, older vets, even Weller and Cole, who now both wore solemn expressions and stood a little straighter. Captain Weller said quietly, "I wanted to say thank you, and I'm sorry." Evelyn shook his hand. "You've learned something valuable. Don't forget it." She paused, then added, "and pay it forward." Back at the commissary, things were different now. Evelyn still wore her jacket, but now, when she walked down the aisles, people nodded. Cashiers smiled. Recruits straightened their posture. A small plaque had been placed near the checkout lane where the confrontation occurred. It read, "In honor of Captain Evelyn Harper and the Ghost 5-4 service beyond recognition and courage beyond praise." Sometimes Evelyn would glance at it and smile, but only briefly, because for her, the mission was never about applause. It was about doing what was right, even when no one was watching. She didn't need her story told. But now that it was, she hoped it reminded everyone of a simple truth. You never know who you're standing next to.